His, so his mother's name was Athaliah. And she, at her son's death, killed by Jehu, who was exercising God's prophecy over the house of Ahab and killed the house of Ahab. He happened to be there and he got it too. And so seeing his son dead, she, who is listed as devilish, destroyed the entire lineage, the entire royal lineage, and usurped the throne. For 6 years she was the head of Israel, of Judah. Now she missed Joash, one of the offspring, and he was hidden quietly away. And Jehoiada, the high priest, tutored him during that time and installed him as king. And through Joash, Jehoiada restored the covenant, the worship of God. He killed Athaliah. He killed the priest of Baal. He restored the temple and the priesthood of the Levites, tore down altars and idols, yet he did not remove the high places. Many good things Joash did during the life of Jehoiada. When Jehoiada died, Joash began worshiping Ashereth poles and idols, and Zechariah, who was the priest at that time, gave him a message saying, because you have forsaken God, God has now forsaken you. And that thrilled Joash so much that he had Zechariah stoned to death in the courtyard of the temple. So we suddenly have a good king turned bad, don't we? In retaliation, the Lord caused a small army from Aram to come and kill all of the leadership. And Joash was mortally wounded, ended up being killed by his lieutenants. So a bad end to a king who didn't really get to show his true mettle until the priest Jehoiada was gone. So he was kind of kept in check by someone else. You ever see anybody like that? They're great as long as someone's there to kind of keep them in line and sort of hold them accountable, but they're gone and bingo, I'm off to college and I am away from my folks. I can do anything I want. Okay. Amaziah was a good king, mostly good, and but not wholehearted to the Lord. He killed those who killed his father. Joash was killed by his lieutenants. He killed them. But he didn't kill the descendants of the lieutenants that had killed his father, which was in keeping with the Mosaic law. So we do have a certain amount of grace Amaziah exercised. Amaziah fielded a 300-man standing army to go attack the Edomites. He didn't think he had quite enough, so he went for 120 talents of silver. He bought another 100,000 foot soldiers from Israel. But a man of God came to him and said, God's not with Israel. If you bring Israel in on this, we're not going to have God on our side. And so he sent the Israelites back, kissing his 120 talents goodbye, which was a sizable sum of money. I couldn't tell you exactly off the top of my head. But at least he obeyed the king, the man of God. But when he fought the Edomites, he brought back their gods afterwards. And he set up a shrine and started worshiping gods of people he had defeated. So the man of God came to him and said, how is it that you worship the gods of those that were not able to protect you against your own hand? He didn't have a good answer. He kept on worshiping these gods. So, as retribution for this, God brought Jehoash of the Israelites to ransack the temple and palace treasures, captured hostages, and there was an eventual conspiracy against Amaziah, and he was killed. So another good king gone bad. You keep wondering, what is it about power that eventually gets to a person so that they become so hard that they cannot be taught? Now, if we think David had issues about disobedience, at least he was repentant and he was teachable. Nathan came to him and told him a parable, and he saw immediately his sin, and he prostrated himself before God. And if you want to read how that all comes out, I think part of that's in Psalm 51, how he cries out to God.
Could I interject just for a minute?
Sure.
Because I think it's really important that we understand that God sent prophets to talk to the kings, to warn them, to teach them, and God spoke directly to the prophets. It was direct communication from God. So God would speak to David. I'm just using David as let's suppose he's a prophet. He speaks directly to David. He directs the path of what he's to do. He tells him what to do, the timing, where to go, and then the prophet obeys. So God put his very best prophets with the nation of Israel. Elijah, Elisha, top prophets. Amos, Hosea.
Obadiah.
And Isaiah, some. And before Jesus came, there were no prophets for 400 years. He just left them in their own mess, let them stew in their own juice, let them build all the temples they want to, have all the sacrifices they want to, play all the games with the priesthood they wanted to. But then the prophets came, John the Baptist and the Christ. So it's important because we look at a mess, and sometimes a mess is because you may hear the word of the Lord, but you don't do anything about it. Does that make sense? In every church, there's a prophet. But they may hear the word of the Lord, but they don't do anything about it. And if they do something about it, usually they're told to go away. Leave it alone. You don't know anything. But I want to clarify that because the most important part of Kings is not exactly what the kings do, but what the prophets do and what God does in that situation.
Betty, am I right? We want to try to be out here by 8:30?
We can go to 8:45.
Okay. I'm going to skip a couple of the kings because I want to get right down to Hezekiah, who is rated as the best, and there's one behind him that is the worst, the son of Hezekiah. So Hezekiah did what was right and pleasing to God, as David his father has done. Now, none of the kings are described in that manner so far. They were always said that they did as their father had done, or they did as they served the Lord. But only two kings rated that they did as their father David had done. That was Hezekiah and later on Josiah. But he did remove the high places. Hezekiah did. He cut down the Asherah poles. He smashed the sacred stones. The people had brought back from the wilderness the snake that Aaron, was it Aaron or was it Moses that had put up on a stake so that they could see the snake, and it was gold or bronze stake, that had been turned into a shrine, and people were offering incense to it. And he was the first king to come and break that apart and stop that nonsense.